All right, listeners, we have a really good question that we want answered today. How many people are really leaving their childhood faith? Is there something to this? I know that a lot of people anecdotally kind of feel that the younger generation is not as involved with religious exercises and churches anymore. But what's really going on, and what do we do about retention rates? Welcome back to the Burge Report. This is our fourth Burge Report. We have been having so much fun doing these. So, Ryan, at this point, I think our people know you, but just in case, you've got to go check out Dr. Burge's stuff at graphsaboutreligion.com. Welcome to your own show.
Yay. Graphsaboutreligion.com. What a name, huh, Sam? That's good branding.
It's great branding.
We all remember it. That means it's great branding.
Some guy asked me, "Well, will you go on the ground and do like on the ground reporting for?" I'm like, "No, it's called Graphs About Religion. I make graphs about religion. It's literally tap the sign. It's in the name. I mean, I
think Ryan Burge as a man on the street interviewer would be phenomenal.
Oh, I love that idea. They wouldn't know
well, that makes two of you. That does not make three of us. Absolutely not. I don't like people, okay? I like to look at my data and make my graphs.
But that's why it would be so funny, is because you would very quickly be able to pick up on that.
So this is a true story. I was asked something about from a major newspaper editor. I'll just say that. I won't say who it was. And I started giving these data points about this certain thing. They go, "We want you to write that story, but we want you to go interview people and ask them questions." I go, "Nope, no, thank you." I literally just turned it down. I said, "I will not go interview anybody. Go find somebody else. Have a nice day." And it was a major news outlet. So that's how much I don't want to talk to people.
I love it. Hey, we need to talk about Tithely, Sam.
Yeah, Tithely is sponsoring today's episode. In fact, they're sponsoring all of the Burge Report. I love what they do for churches. And Dad, I know that you've got a lot of good things to say about them, and rightly so. Tell us a little bit about what they can do for our listeners.
Well, Tithely started off basically as this organization that does the giving stuff for you, the online giving, the records and all. But they keep on expanding, and they keep on providing a complete suite of items that churches can use digitally. They are on the cutting edge. They're the best. My friend, the CEO of Tithely, Dean Sweetman, I went to Dean and I said, "Dean, here's what I want to do. I want to do the Burge Report, and I want you to be the only sponsor of it." He said, "Ryan Burge? Really?" No, he didn't say that part, but he said, "Okay, Tom." He said, "Okay, Tom, we're going to do." And so now
he probably went, "Who's Ryan Burge? Did you just make somebody up right now?"
He knew who you were, but he loved the idea. And so, Dean, thank you. I'm probably going to be sending you an email just as soon as this is over, because we need some raw data, and we'll see if you're able to do it. You may not be able to; it may be proprietary. So we'll see what happens. But I am going to at least make the effort, because I'd love for Ryan just to dissect it, slice it, and graph it. Let me put it that way, because he's all about graphs about religion. So thank you, Tithely. 40,000 churches are using them, but that number probably changed upward since I got this information. By the way, those of you who are watching or listening to us right now, there's some information that Ryan is posting this same month, which is May. So just be certain that I think is going to help you. He mentioned in the last podcast that we did, or is this May? Let me make sure.
It would be June.
This is June. We just did.
We have now entered June.
So go look at that at churchanswers.com. Ryan Burge is our featured writer and featured researcher. We absolutely love having him on these Burge Reports. Sam, talk about these retention rates.
Yeah, well, it's really Ryan that's the expert here. Thankfully, at my church, we do okay with this. I won't say that we're a shining example, but probably better than average. But Ryan, what is a retention rate, and why is it important to churches?
So retention rates are the percentage of people who were raised in a faith that stay in that same faith as adults. So, for instance, if I was raised a Catholic and I'm now a Catholic at 40 years old, I have been retained. But if I was raised Catholic and become Protestant, then I have not been retained. It works the other way too, by the way. Like if I was raised with no religion and I still have no religion, that's technically retention because I'm staying in the same tradition that I grew up in. But if I go from being like a nun to a Protestant, then I have not been retained. And it's just a good metric of how sticky your faith tradition is. I think that's a really important discussion. I never heard that growing up a whole lot with church growth material and things like that, about like keeping your own is probably the most important metric when it comes to the long-term vitality of your church, of your faith tradition. Because if you start getting a leaky boat, lots and lots of bad things are coming down the pike. So retention to me, and I always say this, if I'm walking into a church, the most important thing I look at is how many young people there are, and young families especially. How many kids there are in Sunday school and vacation Bible school and children's church. That to me tells me a whole lot of what the church is going to look like 20, 30, 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and just for the sake of clarity, historically, if you moved from Catholic to Protestant, you were detained. Little church history joke there for anyone that's paying attention.
I feel like that was like a church dad joke.
It was a pastor dad joke is what it was. It was really bad.
Yeah,
well, listen, the last time we did the Burge report, we were talking about the movie Tremors. So, I mean, Ryan, you and I are at that age where the dad jokes come in full force. All right. That's just where we are.
It's my right. It's my duty. It's my sacred obligation to tell bad, groan-worthy jokes at every occasion.
So how old are your children? I never have asked that.
12 and 9. My 12-year-old, you know what? My 12-year-old's playing travel baseball. So every weekend now it's spring, we're moving from one place to another, putting up a tent in the middle of a field with porta potties behind us and poor pitching in front of us for 6 hours on a Saturday. It's quite a delight. And 2 weeks ago, my son played in such a way that I just walked away from the field and got in my car and drove home without saying a word to him. Because that's
encouraging.
Yeah, because my whole thing was, if I say something to my son right now, I'm going to regret it. And so I know myself, and I got in the car and I just drove home. And unfortunately, my wife was like, "Where'd you go?" I'm like, "Oh, wait, I kind of left you to pack everything up." But I was, yeah. Sanctification is a thing on the baseball field. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. That in the school drop-off line. If I lose my salvation, it'll be in the school drop-off line. That's what I've realized in my life.
Yes,
Sam and his brothers
feel
had
both of those things.
Sam and his brothers had to put up with me during games, particularly basketball games. Mm-hmm. Danny Aiken, who's the president of Southeastern Seminary, and I had, between the two of us, we had 5 sons around the same age in the same school in many of the same sports, and neither one of us were sanctified in the audience that was there, and a well-known minister in the area from Southeast Christian Large Church, his name was Bob Russell. He was a senior minister. He came and sat between us one time to try to calm us down.
That's a total Bob Russell move, and he was definitely more sanctified than the two of you. Yes.
And he finally left. He said, "There's no hope." He said, "I don't want to be seen with y'all."
The problem, I will say, the problem at travel baseball is there's not enough people. Like if you're inside a gymnasium, it's loud enough that you can talk to someone next to you and the ref can't hear it. When you're travel baseball, there's not enough people where if you talk to your buddy, the umpire can hear what you're saying. So you got to like whisper really bad things to the guy sitting next to you. Like that guy, that strike zone is awful. Like I've said that so many times, and the guy heard me one time, and my son's the catcher. So I'm like, oh my God, like he's going to like take it out on my kid. So yeah, this too shall pass, a season of my life.
Circling back to retention.
Yes.
You are onto something, and I want to be careful how I say this because it could be taken the wrong way, but just statistically, if you want your church to do well, work with your young families, attract young families, and encourage them to have as many children as they can. And retain those children.
Yep, it's a numbers game. Like I know people don't like when you put it in this context, but I'm a demographer. Like that's kind of what I do, and so I think about in terms of large numbers. So like your individual choice to have 1 child or no children, 5 children or 2 children, isn't really personal to you and your family situation, but it also has like these macro level implications for America, and your family and your church. And so what we know is if retention rates are going down, and they are going down, by the way, there's more volatility in the church marketplace, religious marketplace than ever before. The only way to hedge against that is either get really good at discipleship, which is really hard, by the way. Like, you're always going to have churn. There's no way you can get to 100%. Like, that's just, and you wouldn't want to be at 100%, honestly, because that would be a cult, not a, not a vibrant faith community. So the only way to help is to make the denominator bigger, right? So if you retain 70% of 5 kids per family, that's a lot better than 70% of 2 kids per family. So I know that sounds so callous and crass, but at the end of the day, it is a numbers game, and bigger families are better because retention rates are going down. So you got to get more slices, more chances at keeping young people.
Yeah, and we certainly don't mean it in a crass way. We're simply talking from a statistical standpoint.
Yep.
Any one family is going to have any number of dynamics as to why they have as many kids as they do. And like you said, that's a very personal thing. And, we can't cast judgment on that one family for whatever thing. But from a macro perspective, churches need to attract young families and encourage those young families to have or foster or adopt as many. If they can't have biological children, foster adopt as many children as you can. And so this idea of big families and retaining the children within your church is one of the best things that you can do for the long-term health of your church.
Hey, Ryan, compare mainline Protestants with conservative evangelicals on this retention thing. Let's talk about those two large groups.
Yeah. So the mainliners have always been less good at retaining than evangelicals have. That's been true going back to the 70s. The mainline has been a leaky boat for 70 years now, as far as we can tell. I just saw some data from the 1950s that 52% of all Americans were mainline Protestant in like 1952, 1953. And today it's 10%. So where's that, how does that happen, right? Like, well, the answer is retention's a lot of it, or a lack thereof of retention's a lot of it. And so by 1975, they were 30% of America. Today, they're 10% of America. But here's an interesting statistic. Only 1.5% of all adults are mainline Protestants between the ages of 18 and 35. 1.5% of all adults. There are probably more Muslims in America than there are young mainline Protestants now. Like, it is that
amazing.
Small. Yeah.
That is amazing.
Like, it's, and the retention rate now amongst mainliners is about 55%. Which means they lose almost, for every 2 kids they have, they lose one of them to another faith tradition. And it kind of, by the way, that's evenly split amongst, they're leaving for not just becoming non-religious, but a lot of them become evangelical too. So it's not just one direction or the other direction. It's almost evenly split too, interestingly enough. Evangelical retention is actually the highest of any faith tradition in America today. It's still closer to 75%, down from 80%. Now it's in the low 73% last decade. So still pretty good. It's actually, 18 points higher than mainline, but you still got to think about it this way. For every 4 kids born in an evangelical church, one of them will not be evangelical as adults. Compound that with the fact that fertility rates are declining across the board, including amongst evangelicals. That's, think of it this way, and this is the way I think pastors don't necessarily conceptualize this way, but I do, because this is what I think of. For every kid that you lose through defection, you've got to replace that person somehow to just maintain the number you have right now. So if you add a convert and your retention rate 75%, for every one you lose, you're gaining one. You're not getting bigger. And then if your church is older, for every person that dies, you have to replace them with some younger person coming into the congregation. So your outflow, you got to think about your outflows and your inflows. And there's a lot of outflow in a lot of these older churches. Outflow is death. Retention is part of it, but death's a big part of it too. And that, by the way, that is not to grow. That is just to maintain stasis, to be at 300 people forever. So if you're in a church where the median age is 60 years old, think about all the things that are not working in your direction. You've got deaths happening all the time, and retention is going down and down and down, and you don't have a lot of young families or young kids because your average age is so high. So you're not even offsetting your losses through death. Plus, you're having a retention problem. So I think that's when we talk about, being in a vibrant community, a lot of people moving in and out, that gives you more chance to bring new people in to offset those losses. But in a stagnant community where population is not going up or down and people aren't moving religion, boy, that's a tough situation to try to overcome.
Hey, Ryan, Church Answers is releasing, well, I guess by this time we will have been close to, we will have released it, a scorecard, metrics for the church. Church Health Scorecard is the name of it. We actually have a metric for, is your church too old? And It's not exactly what you're saying, but it's pretty close. What we do is we get the median age in the community, the church's community, not the larger community, from our own report called Know Your Community, and we get that information. We compare it to the median age within the church of attendance, not membership, but of those who are attending. And we basically say if you're within 5 years of the median age, it's okay, but you start getting older than that, and we begin to see problems. So we have red light, yellow light, green light, according to the variance between the two. So we're actually looking at age as one of the church health metrics because you influence us so much.
And I think it's so incredibly important because retention is way easier than conversion. Like I know, like evangelicals, I grew up evangelical. I heard all the stories about I was lost and now I'm found, blind now I'm see. Statistically, that's rare. Like real honest to God conversion is incredibly rare. It's way easier to retain your own people than it is to bring new people in from the outside. And, you know, the statistic I always quote, you know, the one data point that I can really point to is the Latter-day Saints. They're crazy about evangelism. Like to be a good Latter-day Saint, you have to go do a 2-year mission somewhere in the world, and you spend 40 hours a week evangelizing for 2 years. The average number of converts that one missionary gets in 2 years that stick around in the LDS church is 1. So 2 years, 40 hours a week, the yield is 1 person. So when I say conversion's hard, that is exactly what I'm saying when it comes to conversion.
And not with the
children of your church.
Let us interrupt this program for just a moment, and just simply to say, Church Answers is all for the Great Commission. We believe that you should go and reach people for Christ. This is Ryan's talking about data. So you were about to hit that email. I just want to tell you, he's talking about data. He's talking about data. He's not talking about should we or should not go lead people to tell them about the gospel of Christ. Now, back to our program.
This is my favorite part of Twitter with the Ryan Burge Twitter account is Ryan is descriptive, not prescriptive. Everything he does is descriptive, not he's just explaining reality, and people will still think that you are advocating for something.
You know what I advocate for, guys? The truth. You know, like the statistical reality as best as I can. Like I always say, here's the data, you deal with it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not my job to tell you what to do with this stuff. It's my job to tell you and by the way, it's my job to tell you the way the world exists, not the way I want it to be or hope it to be, the way it is. And if you don't like it, don't get mad at me, get mad at the world. Like, I'm just showing you this. It's like getting mad at the weatherman when he says it's going to rain and it rains. Like, it's not my fault it's raining. It's not my fault retention rates are going down. You've just got to realize statistically, evangelization is hard. It is rare. It is difficult. It is expensive. Retention is easier from a pure numerical perspective. I would much rather have a church of a whole bunch of young families than a church of a whole bunch of people who are really going out every Sunday and knocking doors and doing all that evangelization stuff that we were taught about. Because
from a statistical standpoint.
Exactly right. Because statistically, retaining those kids is a much higher percentage than knocking on doors and evangelizing in that traditional way. That's just what the data says.
Let me put you on the spot. And this is not something that I've seen in your data, but I'm curious. I'm sure Ryan just stays up late every night crunching numbers and spreadsheets and doing SPSS regressions. No, Sam. I use R. It's free and open source. I taught myself how to do it. SPSS costs a lot of money, and no one uses it anymore, so don't use SPSS. There's not a person listening that even knows what we're talking about.
I love it.
So the average age of a church member, and it's who's counting and how, it's 58, 59, 60 years old. It's somewhere in that range. Mm-hmm. When are we going to hit a point of no return? Like we're getting close.
Some churches I've already tipped. You know what I mean? Like there's no going back. Like the one that I harp on a lot is the Episcopal Church. You know, the Episcopal Church has 375,000 people that come to church every Sunday. That's their own records, by the way. That's them reporting that to me. They report things like age distribution. Something like 60% of Episcopalians are 60 years and older now. Like it's not good, man. Like you how do you recover from that? Because if a young couple walks into the Episcopal Church and they're 25 years old, college degrees, got their first job, no kids yet, they're going to walk in and see a bunch of grandparents. And I love grandparents. My church is full of them. I'm going to walk out. I'm going to do the old Grandpa Simpson meme, put my hat back on and go right back out the door, because that's not my crowd. So I think once you get too old, the only people you can really attract are older people. And I think, again, that's not a recipe for long-term success for your congregation. It's almost like once you get past the point of no return, you can throw the brakes on all you want, but you're still going off the cliff. And I think several denominations are in that same boat. And I think the SBC and a lot of evangelical denominations are not terribly far from that cliff either right now, because white people are getting older in America. And the biggest bulge in the age distribution amongst white evangelicals is like between 55 and 65 years old right now. So in 20 or 30 years, they're actuarially not going to be here anymore. And there's not a wave of 35-year-olds who are the same size to replace that group that's going to go to their eternal reward.
Yeah, and this is one thing I love about your data, because what you've shown is some groups that people think are young, like the SBC, it's actually older, and some groups that people think are older are actually young, like the Free Will Baptists.
That's right.
And data is data. Facts are our friends. There are groups like the Episcopalians, like the Southern Baptists, that are getting pretty close, if not already there, to a point of no return. One last question before we go. This I can never say it right.
Exvangelical.
Exvangelical.
Yeah.
What is this movement? And walk us through a little bit about what it means for the data.
Yeah, so exvangelical there's really no accepted definition of exvangelical, but the way we kind of like throw it around is someone who grew up evangelical, left the evangelical church, and now spends some of their time critiquing evangelicalism, right? There's a lot of people who just like quit and just never think about it ever again, but there's a contingent of people online who that is their entire persona online, is basically railing against the evangelical tradition. There was a book that just came out written by Sarah McCammon from she's on NPR, called The Exvangelicals. It's partly her story, but partly the larger story of this movement. Statistically, about 3% of Americans are exvangelical, which means they used to we asked them, was there any point in your life you would say you were evangelical, born again? And then we asked them, are you currently an evangelical or born again? And about 3% of Americans said, I was once in my life an evangelical, and now I'm not. So do they exist? Yes. Are they really small? Yes. Do they play an outsized role in the social media discourse? Absolutely. So that's the thing that social media, it distorts things. And so loud voices are not always a multitude of voices. And I think in this conversation, there's a contingent of people online whose entire persona is basically hurling rocks at evangelicalism about all the things that it did. Not that they don't deserve some rocks, by the way. I'm not going to act like evangelicals are like, perfect and everything. But that becomes a sort of way to generate hype and controversy and retweets and traffic and money for some people. And so I think that plays an outsized role in the discourse versus what it actually is in the real data.
And before we wrap it up, I want to go back to this thing about the younger denominations. When you put on there the surprise, I'm there being the grass about religion. When you put on there the surprise that Free Will Baptists are one of the younger denominations, I went to the head of the Free Will Baptist denomination. He's a member of Church Answers. Eddie Moody's one of our favorite guys. And he's based in my town of Nashville. And so I sent him an email. I said, have you seen this that Ryan put out? He said, well, I've seen it because you told me to. I never knew about Ryan Burge until you told me. So I just wanted to put that little part in there. And he said, Thom, we are a lot of rural churches, and our rural congregations tend to keep their young people. So he confirmed it anecdotally, what you had shown from a pure data point of view.
That's interesting, kind of, like adjacent to this whole thing is rural versus urban or suburban. Suburban areas have lots of options for church because there's always a new church popping up, new mega, non-denom church coming. In small communities, the church marketplace is pretty stable. There's not a lot of new entrants and people have been around for a long time. And that makes a lot of sense to me. If you've got, you're only as good as your options. And if if you're in a small town and your church is doing relatively okay, then that's where you're going to stick with. I do think, there's something called religious marketplace theory that basically argues that one of the reasons that religion is so robust in America is because we have this really vibrant marketplace of religion. we don't have a state church. We've never had a state church since the founding. And I think that, we got the Lutherans competing with the Baptists and the Baptists competing with the Catholics. And you've got to be better. You've got to preach a better gospel. You've got to do more outreach. And who really wins in that? I think democracy wins. I think we all win because churches are competing for people, not just assuming they're going to show up because they're the only game in town.
Thank you, Roger Williams. Thank you, John Leland. We have the first freedom and the First Amendment of our Constitution because of you. And that is just a little bit of Baptist history there. And if you don't know those names, you should, because we have a Bill of Rights the way that we do because of them. I also want to give a little hat tip to James Madison. He was part of that too.
And Tom Jefferson too, by the way. He gets a bad rap for the whole deist thing. Dude really believed in religious freedom. He wrote the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. I teach it in class. It's really the precursor to the First Amendment. Jefferson was convinced that what would bind us together is our American identity, not our Lutheran or congregational identity. And that really set the stage for where we are today. And I think we are really, really religious compared to Western Europe, because if you want people to hate something, make it part of the government. And we never did that in America, and we never should do that in America. I think the sociological data backs that up, but I also think I'm a Baptist too. Roger Williams is my guy. Strong separation of church and state is what makes Baptist faith what it is today, and I hope we never go to a different model. So,
amen to that. And thank you to the Danbury Baptist Association for starting the conversation with Thomas Jefferson.
Very good. Yes.
You don't only get graphs about religion, you get American church history. And boy, is it all over the place. Sam, you and Ryan have had a great discussion. I've enjoyed being the old guy, just kind of listening.
We just did a whole episode on why we need young people in the church.
I'm listening to Ryan talk about, and these guys are in their 60s and they're not going to be around long. And I'm thinking, gosh, I'm about to leave my 60s. And what does that say? Yeah, I'm hearing about my own mortality in this. We've done several episodes. What is this, number 4 with Ryan?
Correct.
It's been great. It has absolutely been great. We know that our audience loves Ryan Burge. We know they love his writing and now these podcasts. And the reason we have this podcast from an economic point of view is because of Tithely. And Tithely is the place that you want to go if you need that online text giving, management software, volunteer management, child check-in. You mention it. Great church app, great website. And I thank you, Dean Sweetman, the CEO of Tithely, for allowing us to have this Ryan Burge report. I hope we'll do it again in the future. So we'll check it later.